Hey up. Taking delivery of a new bike is a fantastic experience. And so it should be. You've handed over a large wad of cash, which has possibly taken you months to accrue. You've spent weeks or months planning an emotive purchase, all heading towards that momentous date when you finally pick your bike up, or, as has become more common recently, having it delivered. Now, I have a sort of a checklist, things that I do at the pickup or delivery, and things that I do to the bike when I get home to make it fit me, if you like, a bit better. It's become a subconscious thing for me now. I just do it automatically. It's not something I put an awful lot of thought into. But it's obvious from listening to some of the stories that I've heard in the comments and from emails running this channel over the years that quite a lot of people don't consider these things, and occasionally they run into trouble or they have problems with the bike. So what I thought I would do today is put a video together for new bike buyers, a little checklist, if you like, that'll just allow that experience of getting a new bike to be just a little bit more successful with fewer problems and allow you to get more enjoyment from the bike from the word go. Now, before we get into this proper, I would like to ask you all a big favour. I would very much like to get my hands on the YouTube Silver Play Button Award by the end of this year, if that is at all possible. It's an award that I've been aiming at for the last 4.5 years, but it requires 100,000 subscribers. In fact, it's come to my attention recently that not only are most of my viewers not subscribers, but also most of the commenters are not subscribers, because YouTube does tell me whether or not you're a subscriber when you leave a comment. It would really help me out if you're not a subscriber, if you would just hit that subscribe button, press the notification bell and ensure that your notifications are enabled. It's totally free, it takes seconds, and you can unsubscribe whenever you like. Right, first things first, you want everything to go as smoothly as possible from your side on the day of pickup or arrival. So it should go without saying really to make sure that you've got your insurance and any other legal documents required in order before that day. But there's also another little bit of research that you need to do. Running in procedure. My experience of most salesmen is that they don't have a clue. So don't leave it to chance. Well before picking your bike up, do a bit of research online. Most manufacturers will publish online manuals for the bike, and in that manual you will find the full running in procedure. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm tarring all dealerships with the same brush. There are some fantastic dealerships that will be very knowledgeable and will give you all the information you require when you pick the bike up. There are dealerships that are average and possibly won't know, but will take the trouble to find out for you. And there's some that will just tell you whatever comes into the head because they don't give a toss, basically. Take that doubt out of the equation by finding out for yourself before receiving or picking up the motorcycle. You would be surprised how many people contact me because they were given the wrong information when they picked the bike up. They've gone 1,000 or 2,000 revs over the recommended range by following spurious advice, and they're worried that it's damaged the engine on the bike. Chances are it won't have, but it's not ideal, and it does put a bit of a downer on your day if you have that worry, half an hour after you've picked the bike up. The run-in procedure is something that I consider to be very important, and it should be done correctly. If you click on the information tab top right hand of the screen, the link will take you to a video that I published a couple of years ago about running in procedures. And it's well worth a watch if you're new to buying new motorcycles and it's a process that you're not familiar with. Next thing up is signing for the bike and inspecting the bike. Do not sign anything until you've given the bike a good going over with a fine tooth comb. It's far easier to reject a product before the point of sale than it is once you've actually signed for it. So resist any pressure from a salesman when you arrive at the dealership or from a delivery man that delivers the bike to you to get the paperwork out of the way before you look at the bike. We pay big money for motorcycles these days, and you've got every right to expect that motorcycle to be as perfect as possible, and you need to confirm that before you sign for it. Now, in the case of bike deliveries, most of the guys that deliver bikes for, dealerships these days tend to be just jobbing men with a van. They don't actually work for the dealership, they're just under contract to deliver a bike for them. And if there is a problem with the bike, it's very likely that they'll tell you that you've got to sign for it and sort it out with the dealership on the phone later on. You don't at all. Until he's got your signature on the invoice that you've accepted the bike, the transaction is not complete, and you're well within your rights to say, no, sorry, I'm rejecting this bike, I'm not signing for it, take it back. That puts you in control of the situation, so he's going to have to ring up the dealership, explain the problem, you're maybe going to have to exchange a couple of photographs with the dealership, and the satisfactory resolution of that fault or defect can be entered onto the invoice before you sign it, and get either the salesman or the delivery man to sign it as well, to acknowledge that fault and acknowledge an undertaking that they're going to get it sorted out. Now, in the UK, and I think in most parts of Europe, in this situation it stops the statutory clock for the purposes of the consumer laws. It might not be the same in every country, but basically it puts you in the first day of ownership for as long as it takes them to sort that problem out. It effectively extends the time that they are liable for any defects on the bike, and the clock doesn't restart until they've satisfactorily sorted it out. As I say, it puts you in the strongest position of control, and it's far easier to deal with it that way than trying to convince them a week later that, the scratch on the tank or whatever wasn't caused by you. It was done when it was delivered, or this component was broken when it was delivered, it hasn't been broken since you took delivery. Most dealerships are pretty good, but we do get the occasional rogue that will try and wriggle out of his responsibilities. I mean, I have actually witnessed salesmen leaning against an area of damage on a paintwork to hide it from a customer, and doing things this way protects you from that kind of dealership. So don't let them rush you. If they want your money, they will be patient enough and open enough to let you examine the bike properly before signing for it. And what you should be looking for are things like dents, chips and scratches on the paintwork and on the frame. Check the paintwork out from every angle, and don't just rely on your eyes. Use your hands to feel in areas that you can't see properly, like underneath the tank, especially areas that may have been chipped while things were being fitted, and make sure that everything is to your satisfaction. Now, the other things to check are things like the routing of cables and wires. These bikes come sort of partially flat packed, if you like. They come in a crate and they have to be partially assembled at the dealership. And you will often find, if it hasn't been done properly and diligently, that cables will be misrouted. There'll be undue pressure on some cables, or they'll be rubbing against something they shouldn't be rubbing against, which may cause you problems later down the line. It's going to be far more convenient for you to find it at the dealership before you sign for the bike, so they can drag a mechanic out of the workshop and get him to put it right, rather than you having to go through the hassle of booking it in and getting it sorted out in the future. Now, once you've checked the bike over aesthetically, there's one last thing to check, and that is to make sure that all the lighting and indicators are working correctly. I know some of you will be rolling your eyes, well, it's a brand new bike, of course it'll be working correctly, but let me tell you something. I once picked up a brand new BMW from a BMW dealership rode 35 miles home, half of that journey being in the darkness, to find that every car that overtook me on the motorway was sounding the horn at me. When I got home, I found that there was no bulb in the tail light, so I had no tail light and no brake light. Now, this was partly my fault because I hadn't checked the bike over properly before taking it. I'd collected the bike after work. I was picking it up more or less on closing time at the dealership, so I allowed myself to be rushed through the process. And as it turned out, after the bike had been PDI'd, some mechanic had needed a bulb. There weren't any on stock, so I'd borrowed one from my bike, but it hadn't been replaced. Do not take it for granted that because you're paying big money for a brand new bike that everything will be as it should be. Prove it to yourself by checking it. So it's just common sense really. Don't take the piss, but don't allow yourself to be rushed. Take the time to check it out properly. If the bike is fine, you're good to go. If you come across any problems, you can get them properly recorded before you sign for the bike. Or if you're really not happy with the condition of the bike, you can reject it. And don't forget, if you're happy with the bike, once you've signed for it, before you set off, don't forget to adjust your mirrors. In the excitement, it's something we've all forgotten to do. I'll put my hands up to that. Now, on your ride home, pay attention to a few things. Rear suspension on most bikes is adjustable for preload, so pay attention to the suspension, whether it's too soft, too hard, or whether it's just in the Goldilocks zone. And also the angle and position of your handlebars and your control levers, because these can make a huge difference to the handling of the bike and whether or not it is comfortable for you when you're riding it. Now, we'll put suspension to one side for a moment. We see a lot of reviews on borrowed bikes where people complain about problems with the wrists, the neck, the shoulders, the back. You know, that the riding position of the bike is not right, they found it uncomfortable, it feels under-braked at the front. A lot of this can be just put down to the fact that the bike has not been adjusted for that rider, and it makes a huge difference. Before you get into the realms of handlebar risers, simply adjusting the angle of the handlebars can go a long way to mitigating back, shoulder and neck problems, as well as pressure on the wrists. So pay attention to these things on the ride home and then make some adjustments to see what difference it makes. It only takes 10 or 15 minutes. Now obviously, if, like the Continental GT, your bike has clip-ons fitted, this isn't an option. But that doesn't mean that there are not things that you can do to mitigate problems with your wrist. And simply adjusting your levers, which is something that you should do after you've adjusted your handlebars if you have that facility, again can go a long way to improving the handling and performance of the bike, as well as your comfort. The human hand is basically a cable-operated gripping device, and its optimum position for efficiency is when the hand runs straight in line with the forearm, i.e. no bend to the wrist. And any deviation from that straight position means that those cables are under more stress and pressure, and your strength of grip is lessened. And when you're riding a bike, it can also be responsible for discomfort and pain in your wrist and your hand. Now, you should make all of these adjustments while seated on your bike in your normal riding position insofar as you can. Loosen the clamps up for your control levers, that's your front brake and for your clutch, and adjust the angle so that in your normal riding position you've got that straight wrist position while you're covering or operating the lever. This ensures that any body weight is transferred straight along your arm and your wrist onto the palm of your hand without putting pressure on your wrists, and that you have maximum unencumbered grip on your levers with your hand. You're not fighting against the physics of how your hand works. One thing that always strikes me when I see sort of first impression reviews of bikes, when people say that, you know, you've got to pull really hard on the front brake to get anything to happen, is that they probably haven't got the lever adjusted correctly. So although to them they're pulling hard on that brake, they're actually exerting very little force on it. These are simple adjustments that can make a big difference. Everybody's different. Tailor the bike to suit you. Don't try to make your body conform to the bike where you don't have to. And of course, when you've done all that, don't forget to readjust your mirrors again. Last but certainly not least then, the rear suspension. Familiarise yourself with your onboard toolkit, and in there you should find some sort of adjustment tool for your rear suspension. It may be a C-spanner, as it is with the Royal Enfields, or it may just be a sort of Tommy bar that inserts into the shock absorber in order to turn the adjustment ring. Most dealerships will just ignore the rear suspension, and it'll probably be set at the factory on minimum preload, which for a lot of us will mean that it's a bit of a springy, bouncy ride, a little bit too soft. A competent dealership, like the dealership I got the Continental GT from, will adjust it to about the halfway mark, which is where it should be, because that is the point from which you should make any adjustments. So if you find that your ride home was a bit harsh, you can slacken the preload off a little bit. If you found it was too soft and springy, you can tighten it up a little bit. You can't really get yourself into any trouble adjusting preload only, which is what most bikes are equipped with. Make sure that you adjust both sides with twin shock absorbers equally, and basically just have a play around with it until you find a setting that suits you. But do bear in mind that new springs do slacken off as they age, so you may need to adjust it again in the future. Now, this has been by no means an exhaustive guide to picking your bike up and then making those minor adjustments required to make your first experience of that bike a positive one. But these tips will go a long way towards ensuring that. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and as I said earlier on, please, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to this channel. I really would appreciate that. I am of course going to be back on Friday, so until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.